If I had to draw a conclusion, I think that we have conflicts that escalate into short-term wars, short-term, that periodically disrupt financial markets but don't lead to anything more than corrections. But I think that the time will come, probably around 2028, when the two parts of the world, the Western world and the BRICS group of nations, actually then bash their heads together. And we get, if not World War III, but something very close to it. And that really gives the profile for financial markets: extreme volatility. So probably in the first 6 to 9 months, we see big corrections in equity markets. The really big issue is we know that Trump is not a warmonger, but how is he going to be able to become a peacemonger? And will he be allowed to? And what are the consequences? I think that's the really big issue, because how it plays out will have a significant impact on financial markets. At the moment, the consensus is Trump is not a warmonger. He is going to find a solution to Ukraine. He's going to find a solution to Israel. So you can forget the geopolitical situation as being a danger to financial markets.
And do you think that's true?
He's going to try, but I don't think he makes it. I think that the big issue for Putin over Ukraine is future security. And that means one way or another, he needs control over not just the eastern side of Ukraine, but the whole of Ukraine. Because within a few years, America will have hypersonic technology, or the equivalent. And just to draw a line along the Dnieper River won't give Russian radar systems enough warning for incoming missiles. So I think that's going to be an extremely complicated issue to resolve. It's not, and Putin doesn't want a ceasefire per se, because historically all a ceasefire has done is allowed the West to rebuild their resources and to rearm, etc. And then you get the next war. So I think Ukraine is going to be an ongoing saga. It will have its perceived peaceful moments, but it's an ongoing saga. And as far as the Middle East is concerned, it's very unlikely that we will get to the ceasefire agreement of Part 2 and Part 3. it's pretty clear that when you read what's really been happening in Gaza, Hamas has not been defeated. They govern Gaza. They have recruited as many fighters as they have lost. Israel is causing even more disruption on the West Bank. Israel does not want to withdraw from what they've taken land in the Lebanon. It's very interesting. I was reading a report that America is building one, if not the largest embassy in the Lebanon, outside Beirut, close to the sea, and 60 miles from Israel. Huge complex. That's not an embassy for a small country like Lebanon. And then when you get to what's going to happen between Israel and Iran, Rubio, America's Secretary of State, gave a very interesting commentary to, I think it's one of the intelligence, anyhow, a group of congressmen, or from the Senate, I can't remember which, in which he basically said, we have no argument with the people of Iran. We have an argument with the clerics and the way that the clerics are running the country, supporting the axis of resistance, namely Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis, Iraq, etc., and implying pretty strongly that we have to enact regime change in order to bring peace to the Middle East. Yet on the other hand, you see Saudi and Iran mending fences, having joint naval exercises. So you have to question whether, in order to have a peaceful settlement in the Middle East, whether you have to have war first. So there are so many moving parts that it's very difficult to come to firm conclusions. But I do think, and I think this is where there is a possible division within Trump's security advisors, is on the one hand, there's one division saying, we've got Russia on the run. Russia its economy is weakening rapidly. They can't afford to continue the war. Therefore, we should press Russia even more by imposing more sanctions, etc. But I think the really big issue, I think the wars in Ukraine, in Europe, and in the Middle East are secondary to the big war, which is the other division within Trump's camp, which says that we have to somehow stop the growth of BRICS group of nations, because should they mature and develop an alternative currency to the US dollar, then America's hegemony, if not at risk, is gone. So the real war is between America or the West and BRICS. So I suspect that Trump's primary policy is, how do we break BRICS up? We offer attractive arrangements with China. In return, China has to reduce its relationships with Russia. Or maybe at the same time or simultaneously, we offer the Iranian government deals that are attractive to Iran, because within Iran there is definitely a growing split between the president, who wants closer ties with the West, and the supreme leader, who wants not control over the Middle East, but wants the Western influence to leave the region, in the belief that the region has matured enough that they can sort out their own problems. I think it's that attitude is shared by many of the rulers in the region. It's time for the West to leave. So again, I come back, so many moving parts. If I had to draw a conclusion, I think that we have conflicts that escalate into short-term wars, short-term, that periodically disrupt financial markets but don't lead to anything more than corrections. But I think that the time will come, probably around 2028, when the two parts of the world, the Western world and the BRICS group of nations, actually then bash their heads together, and we get, if not World War III, but something very close to it. And that really gives the profile for financial markets: extreme volatility. So probably in the first 6 to 9 months, we see big corrections in equity markets. And one can argue that get the bad news out of the way is early on in your term of office is good news for the president. Then you get tax breaks and deregulation and falling interest rates, blah, 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 coming into the system, and you're going to get 2 to 3 years of an inflation blow-off. I think people are not recognizing the impending weather patterns with the Atlantic Ocean water temperatures falling significantly, starting probably the end of this year, early next year, which changes weather patterns. And then again, either starting this year or next year, we get the Glazberg cycle, which last erupted and caused the Dust Bowl in the US Midwest, which caused a collapse in food production. So I think that other than what central banks do to stimulate business activity, the food cycle is going to cause significant inflation, which peaks in 2028, around that time. And then if you get inflation repeating, which I think it will, what it did in 1980, US CPI at 13%, global inflation around 15%. What does that do to long bond yields? They don't stay at 5-6%. They go north of 10%. And what does north of 10% give you? But in a highly leveraged system, it gives you a collapse and recession, if not rolling recessions for the next 5 odd years, if not depression. So that's, in a nutshell, is how I see events unfolding until about 2032, to around about the mid 2030s.
Yeah, wow, a lot to unpack in a lot of different directions that you for laying it out for us. But I'd be interested. It seems like BRICS is really, it's not really an alliance. It's more just like actors being pushed together because of the aggression of the US. So as you said, it seems like if they were to go in, make a few deals, it wouldn't be too hard to split that alliance. Do you agree?
I'm not so sure about that. Um, a lot of people view BRICS as being a group of countries, as you suggest, pushed together by America's aggression. I think it is actually deeper than that. It's a group of countries that no longer want to be dominated by America and do want a multipolar world. And they see in themselves that if they can mature, that their group of nations, many of which are the future growth countries of the world because of demographics, that they become, by natural forces, the leading, they take over the leadership of the world from the West. And I think that it would take an awful lot of America using all of its toolbox to break the three major constituent parts of BRICS, which is Russia, China, and Iran. Don't forget that Russia and Iran have recently signed a very deep and broad strategic alliance covering, I think, something like 60 odd articles. What is interesting in that alliance is that contrary to popular thinking, it does not include, should one be attacked by the West, that the other comes to its defense. It's not in the statutes, but in all probability, it will mean that if Iran is attacked, Russia will support Iran, as they are already, by shipping in Russia's state-of-the-art anti-missile technology, and armaments, etc., etc.
That makes sense, and it seems to, as you said, it seems to be that they're sort of integrating further and further and further. And the concerning part, I guess, is you look at Europe and where I'm based, it seems to becoming weaker. So it's the risk that the US allies become weaker while the BRICS nations become stronger.
Yeah, I mean, Trump basically dislikes NATO, but he's saddled with NATO. And are the European members of NATO going to cough up what Trump wants them to cough up, which is for the bigger countries 5% of GDP, for all others between 2 and 3%, at a time when their budgets are strained? So do they give up subsidies for the green economy? We can but hope. So a very, very complex issue. And the other complexity is that should NATO be seen as, if Ukraine is defeated, it means it's a NATO defeat. And what does that imply for the future of NATO? Maybe that's what Trump would like to see. I don't know. But all of this talk of NATO expanding to the east, I think it's just outright stupidity. So again, it comes back. We've got such change of government is creating almost more questions than answers. Always, when you get change, you get conflict. So, very difficult environment.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it does sort of remind you of, I guess, the 1950s, 60s, and potentially 70s at the moment, where there's all these proxy wars, as you said, Ukraine, Russia, Iran, Israel, Gaza, Lebanon, etc. So I'm guessing it sounds like you think there's going to be some of these more of these proxy type wars with backing from the different sides that could then potentially lead into a kinetic war between the sides.
Yeah, I think that's the end game. How we get to the end game is, one, with the change of government, you're creating more moving parts and just adding to the complexities. But I think that, my bottom line is that we don't break out into a big war until around 2028. And then I'm afraid we do.
Yeah, well, it sounds like that would be nuclear. It's hard to imagine a big war without.
No, I don't think nuclear. I think through the back channels that all the players in the game um, have agreed that we must not go down the nuclear route. You don't have to go down the nuclear route. You've got hypersonic technology now. It is equally devastating, but without the um, after effects of a nuclear attack.
Okay, yeah, this scary to think, but as you said, it seems like the way that things are going. So how do you see? You said this is not going to be very positive for market. It's going to be very volatile. Um,
Well,
yeah, are there any? Yeah,
yeah. If you play the volatility, I mean, we've got a decent correction starting any day now in equity markets. Um, that will take, for instance, the S&P down to about 5,000. But then we can see by 2028, again in a very volatile manner, S&P around 8.5, or even higher. So again, this is not a time to make long-term investments. It is a time to trade.
yeah, it's really interesting to hear. And what impact do you think this has on other assets? I think like commodities, precious metals, bonds.
Well, they follow that volatility. I mean, for all the talk about copper used in data centers and in green economy, which is going to fall by the wayside, I think it's the big driver behind copper consumption is global growth. So for copper, I think we're going to have starting later this year, a nice increase in copper consumption and a 4% increase next year, 26, and maybe 3% in 2027. And that will give you a nice tight market. So we have a decent correction in copper prices until the third quarter, and that's the start of a 2 to 3 year bull market. But it's not a time to invest long term for the reasons I gave earlier.
Yeah, and then is that? I'm guessing that's the same for, as you say, gold and bonds. They're
No,
just going
gold follows a different route because gold is being seen as the preserver of value. Most currencies are fiat currencies and will remain so. So your gold buying is less retail buying and more institutional and central bank buying. So I think every dip in the gold price you buy. And I think eventually, I think gold will be the base behind the BRICS currency because both China and Russia hold significantly larger tonnages of gold than the market perceives them to hold. And in fact, I understand that between China and Russia, Russia runs a big trade surplus with China. It's balanced by the equivalent tonnage of gold that China deposits in its central bank. to cover Russia's trade surplus. So maybe that's the way that the BRICS eventually will move. In the process, bringing gold back into the monetary system.
Yeah, okay. And it seems like, yeah, that's what's happening. The West is selling gold and gold miners, and then the East is just buying the sort of
That's
precious
right.
metals.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep, that definitely makes sense. So, Simon, thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. We've covered quite a lot
Pleasure.
during this time. But yeah, my last question is, what is one message you want people to take away from our conversation?
Play the volatility, but make sure that by 2028 you're well stocked up with food and cash plus gold.
Great message. So thanks again. If anyone wanted to find out more about your work and what you do, where would the best places for that be?
Simon-Hunt.com.
Perfect. Put in the description below.
Okay,
But thanks again for your time.
super. Thanks for having me.
Hey everyone, thank you for listening. I really appreciate the support. If you've got value out of this, I'd really appreciate it if you could like, subscribe, or comment. You know, good or bad feedback. I'm always open to that. But it really helps with the channel. As I said before, only about 14% of people actually subscribe to this channel. So if you were to that, it would really help. It could mean we could continue to grow. If not, thanks for watching and see you on the next show. And you also might like this video right here. All right, thanks again.